Today is Monday, September 25th, 2017. My name is Louise Stern, and it's my honor and privilege today to interview Dena Kaplan with the Jewish Historical Society of Fairfield County. We're at the Stanford Jewish Center. Good morning, Dena.
Good morning,
Welcome.
Louise.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Dena, when and where were you born?
I was born in Stanford Hospital, and it was November 1st, 1937.
Okay, a baby. And your parents, where were they born?
My father was born in Russia and came to the States around 1908, and my mother was born on the Lower East Side of New York.
Oh, so she was born in this country also?
Absolutely. But he was not. He emigrated to this country.
Uh-huh. And how about your grandparents? Do you know?
My grandparents were born in Poland, possibly Russia, and that was all four of them.
You don't know where in Russia?
My father was born in an area called Slovakia,
Uh-huh.
and I don't know any more than that.
Oh, okay. And what did your dad do? What did your grandfather do?
My grandfather, in the old country,
Or grandfathers, rather.
I have no idea, but my father's father, I believe, was a machinist. He worked very well with his
Really?
hands, yes. He was highly intelligent, and this was the work that he was able to get, and that's what he did.
Yeah, and your father?
And my father was a businessman. He at first worked for Martin Levine at the Marley Company in Stanford, and he managed that store for about 25 years. And then he and one of Martin Levine's brothers, Jack, opened their own store in 1950, an electrical wholesale supply store, Elm Electric Supply.
Okay.
That's my father.
And tell us a little bit about your early family life. What was it like, you know, what you back and remember?
It was very nice. I had a younger brother, and we just did the regular thing. Spent a lot of time at the Jewish Center, and you know,
That's
all the
when it was on
activities.
Prospect Street?
When it was on Prospect Street, and all the Jewish kids in town went there. It was like one big family. Everybody spoke to everybody.
So what kinds of things did you do there?
Oh, everything. Bowling, swimming, arts and crafts, dance class, Camp JC. That was the Jewish life.
Okay. And of course that was part of an education, but what kind of an education did you receive? Where did you go to school?
Well, I went to the Stanford schools and then went to Wheaton College and Columbia University, and also got a master's degree at Fairfield University.
Where?
Fairfield University.
Okay.
Master's in special education.
And describe the Jewish aspects of your home. What kind of holidays did you have? What kind of food did you have?
Well, my family was kosher, and we celebrated all the holidays and had family, and it was just a very pleasant youth.
Mm-hmm. And how did you, celebrate life cycle events, birthdays, religious milestones?
As far as birthdays, we played pin the tail on the donkey and had a birthday cake, and people wore little hats, and that was a birthday.
Okay, and tell us about the kinds of foods.
Well, my mother was a good cook and a good baker, so we had the traditional Jewish foods in addition to regular foods.
And of course you had a kosher home.
That's correct.
Do you still keep kosher?
I do.
Do you? And were you bat mitzvahed?
I was not.
And then you can't tell us what it was like.
Nope.
Is that because there were no bat mitzvahs then?
No, we didn't have bas mitzvahs. What we had were at Temple Bethel. We were members of Agudas Shalom and Temple Bethel, but I was painfully shy in those days. And I knew you had to get up in front of everybody and make a speech, and I just put my foot down and said I wouldn't do it, and I didn't.
And Can you elaborate on that a little? How did you overcome the shyness?
Well, I think I think that I became less shy when I was about 50 years old.
Okay.
That's basically it.
And where you told us how your parents were made a living. But
Well, that
where,
was
where did
my
you,
father. At one time, my mother was a public school teacher in New York City prior to my birth.
Mm-hmm. And where did you live when you were growing up?
I lived in one house on the corner of
Really?
6th Street and Summer. And there were two houses on 6th Street. And when my parents bought the house, let's say in 1935 or 6, 6th Street was a dirt road. And there was, of course, no Ridgeway Center. That was all a big hill, huge hill, and dirt all the way from Summer to Bedford, all the way up to Bull's Head. And of course that changed over the years. I think that 6th Street was the dividing line between the city and the town. And then they changed it in later years.
Right, yeah. And tell us about when you got married and with your family, starting a family, and what was that like? And where were you living then?
Well, I got married in 1961, and my late husband, Jay, and I lived in Manhattan for 3 years, and then moved to Riverdale, and then eventually moved to Stamford.
And you started your family?
Well, by the time we moved to Stamford, we had 2 boys, and then my daughter was born in 1968 here in Stamford.
And did they live here?
My older boy, Mitchell, lives here. Actually, he lives around the corner from me just by chance.
Yeah. And do you have grandchildren?
I have 4 grandchildren, a boy and a girl in Stamford, 14 and 12, and 2 in New York. The boy is 11 and the little girl will be 8.
It's wonderful.
A lot of fun, a lot of fun.
So you started to tell us, but just exactly, when did you settle in Fairfield County after you were married, and why did you come here?
Well, we actually looked in other places, and my husband was thinking of Long Island, and I finally convinced him that I refused to live in Long Island, and New Jersey was the same thing. And finally one day he called me and he said, you know, I found you in Stamford. I'm going to find a house in Stamford. And I thought it was kind of silly because it was a long ride, but whatever it was, that's what we did.
Right. And how many houses have you lived in since you've been in Stamford?
Just 2. That house and the one that I currently live in.
Yeah. And what was your first job?
My first paying job or my first job?
Both.
Well, my first job was as a babysitter, which I started at the age of 11 or 12. And then I worked at the age of 16. I went across the street to an office building that had been erected where Ridgeway Center is now. And I worked at Citizens Utilities Company in the summertime and during the school vacations.
Mm-hmm.
And I just did anything and everything that they needed done in the office.
And I know you've worked until fairly recently, haven't you?
Yes, yes.
Tell us about that a little bit.
Well, I was a public school teacher in New York City. And then when we moved to Stamford, I stopped working and did a lot of charity work. And when I was about 35 years old, I decided that I had to do something else, and got a master's degree in special ed, and I was a special ed private tutor all the years until about 5 or 6, possibly 7 years ago.
Yeah. Do you do anything now with the program that they have at the JCC?
No.
No, okay. Did you ever experience any anti-Semitism as you were growing up or throughout your life?
Well, 2 incidents that I remember. I remember a certain young man on Summer Street throwing an ice ball and hitting me with it and calling me a dirty Jew. That I remember very clearly. And another thing was that someone had promised to sell my father a certain piece of property at a certain price. and then reneged on it. And the talk in the House was very clear that it was because the man was an anti-Semite.
And what was that effect on you?
Well, it was just, it just brought home that it really was a thing. And I knew that we lived in an area that had been previously restricted. Across Bedford Street up into the Ravona area, all of that was a restricted area, and I believe High Cliff at the same time.
Yeah.
So I understood it a little bit better.
Now, what wars have you lived through?
Well, and anything since World War II.
And how did each one affect your life?
Well, not a whole lot, truly. I was not involved in politics, and I was very busy, bringing up children and going to school, and I just was in another world. The only thing that I remember very clearly was during World War II when I was a child, when we would drive from Stamford to the Lower East Side to visit my grandma and great uncle and my great grandmother. Along the Hudson River, there were very tall barriers so that you couldn't see into the water. And I remember that very distinctly. That had an effect on me. But I can't say I was very involved in any of the other wars.
And how about the Korean War?
Well, like everybody, you get upset and that kind of thing.
And in the Vietnam War, your sons weren't draft age at that point, were they?
No.
So, you've been here since you were born.
Basically.
What kind of community involvement have you had? I know it's been a lot.
Oh, a great deal of community involvement. When I was 11, I was a Girl Scout and a Brownie and all of those wonderful things. And I remember they wanted to volunteer for the Visiting Nurse Association. To this day, I don't know what they did with an 11-year-old, but I was their volunteer.
Yeah.
So that started my volunteer career.
And so what are some of the things you like to do in your spare time?
Well, now in my senior years, I like to play bridge and love the theater and movies and concerts and playing with the grandchildren, that type of thing.
I know you're quite proficient at that.
Well, I
Louise.
enjoy those things.
Can we go back to your community involvement after the Girl Scouts?
Well, let me think.
In any community?
In any community. Well, I did things that the Girl Scouts did. I did the visiting nurse. Can't remember what else I did in those years. I truly don't remember, but when I went to college, I did some volunteer work at a mental institution. The music teacher's wife went every week to a certain mental institution, Foxborough State Mental Institution, and I would accompany her and we would do what was needed to do. And so I did that kind of thing.
Okay, anything else?
Volunteer work, right? Okay, well, I guess it was Hadassah and Federation and I don't know, all of the groups that we were involved with, when I was younger. The Jewish Hospital for Denver and whatever was out there, I sort of took part in.
What advantages did these volunteer organizations, what did it do for you?
Well, number one, it got me out of the house because it was a very busy time with children, and to speak to adults was something. And I don't know, I came from a charitable family, and people, I was brought up that way, and that was the right thing to do in my view. So that's what I did.
Good citizens.
Tried anyway, tried.
And one of the things we didn't talk about was which Sanford schools did you go to?
I went to the public schools. I went to Franklin School. We walked to school in those days. And Franklin School, Burdick Junior High, which my father attended when it was a high school.
Really?
That's correct. And Stanford High School.
So Burdick was originally a high school? I didn't know that.
That's true.
Now, I know that you were a memorable teacher. So, who were some of your mentors?
As a teacher? Nobody.
Nobody.
No, I
And
instead,
may I-
I did that. I actually started tutoring when I was 16 also. My mother told me that her hairdresser had a daughter who needed help. And I said, okay. And I tutored this girl, and it was in math. And turned out that she was the treasurer of her class. So that was my 16-year-old
Okay.
beginning.
And have you mentored anybody?
Oh, I don't know if you would call what I did mentoring, but as a private tutor, I mentored all of these students.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the things that we didn't get was, what was your father's full name?
My father's name was Nathan Olshansky,
Oh.
Olshansky.
Okay. And
And
So-
my mother's name was Sarah Denowitz.
okay, you beat me to it. And so, what kinds of inventions have you lived through, and what have they impacted on your life? I mean,
Well, I was happy that the wheel was invented because I spent a lot of time on my bicycle as a child. And, well, of course, the computer, in modern times. I don't know, I never really thought about the different inventions,
mm,
but the wheel is a good one.
anything else? Okay. Now, what kind of advice do you have for future generations?
Oh, well, just be positive and put one foot in front of the other and
Yeah.
do what you like to do and have a happy life doing what you do.
And how?
Could you tell us more
Okay,
about your father's business, where it was, what it looked like, who
Certainly.
came, who worked there?
My father and a fellow by the name of Jack Levine opened the Elm Electric in 1950, and they opened it on the corner of Elm and Hawthorne Street, and were successful immediately because my father understood that he had to buy metal because it was wartime. It was, it was not wartime exactly, but it was when there were shortages and things like that. And he was a highly intelligent man, and he understood lots of things. So he had the materials to open up with immediately. He didn't have to order things and wait, in case they were back ordered. So he was a success right away. He had competition in town because he had worked for 25 years for his competition.
Sure.
But he and Jack were successful, and Jack took care of the lighting, and my father took care of all of the electrical business. And he had very nice employees who stayed with him for many years. I still remember them. Bob and Eddie Darrow. They were I just remember them. And he had a secretary who was with him all the years.
What was her name?
I'm just trying to think of it. I can't come up with it right now, but I may be able to.
That's good.
And how about your mom? What did she do outside the home?
My mother
If
was.
anything.
Oh, yes, no. Well, she was very involved with Hadassah. As a matter of fact, I think she sold more trees in 18 years of selling Hadassah trees than anybody. And she told me she had a large Jewish clientele and Christian clientele.
Uh-huh.
She said a lot of people knew that Jewish people liked that kind of thing, and she had a very beautiful handwriting because she was educated in the New York City public schools, and so she did a lot of that. She was not the healthiest person, so she didn't exactly run around from one activity to the next, but Hadassah was her love.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very big organization in my youth and for years
So she just wasn't
afterwards.
home taking care of you and taking care of the house
No,
and cooking?
no, she was busy, and on occasion she would have mahjong games in the
Mhm.
house, maybe bridge, I don't remember that too well.
So we've talked about a lot of things, but I'm sure there might be some other things you want to talk about.
Well, I just don't know what you'd like to hear.
Local politics?
It
Nothing?
was not
Ever involved in?
politics was not my thing. It
Were
was
you ever
not-
involved in any politics at all?
No,
No.
that was not anything that I did.
When you were teaching, what schools were you in?
Well, I was in the New York City Public Schools, and then when I taught here locally, I went into 6 schools. And then in 1988, I gave up 5 of them and just stayed at Greenwich Country Day School as a private tutor, and also tutored a great deal in my home. When I was really busy, I was working 60 hours a week, many weeks, 4 years. So it was pretty busy.
Have your children gone into education as well?
No, I have 3 children. My 2 boys were trained as attorneys, and only one of them worked as an attorney for 8.5 years, and he went into the real estate business, as the other boy was in the real estate business as well, but they did different things. And my daughter became a licensed clinical psychologist, and she practices in New York City at this time. She's the one with the 2 little children.
And, tell us the names of your children.
My children, my son who lives in Stamford is Mitchell Kaplan. And my son who lives in New York is David Kaplan. I should really give you their middle names, Mitchell Dean Kaplan and David Justin Kaplan. And my daughter in the city is Lisa Jill Kaplan Ashenmill.
Dena, you've been in Stanford a long time.
Certainly have.
And you can remember back, where you're here now. What do you think was better, then or now? And in what ways?
Absolutely then. It was much more peaceful. It was, it's a little scary right now, to tell you the truth,
Mhm.
at least for me. And I just didn't feel the stress in those days.
Yeah.
I just didn't. Things, and people seemed to get along, and the community was a much smaller community. And as I said, the Jewish Center was a hub for all the ages. And I don't know, it just seemed like a happy place.
Mhm.
And you could get around more easily. The lack of so many crowds, crowded streets. I don't find it quite as desirable now, even though Stanford offers so much with theater and all of that. But we did have the Civic Music Association, which is now the Stanford Symphony, or whatever
Mhm.
they call it. And so we had cultural things here in town, which were nice. But now, of course, it's a much bigger city with many more, corporate businesses.
Right. Sort of along those lines, as you were growing up, did you take part in any Jewish organizations before you became an adult?
Oh, everyone. It was B'nai B'rith Girls, it was the Agudas Shalom youth group at Temple Bethel Youth Group. I was actually president of the Temple Bethel Youth
Oh.
Group. And
Started early.
I was always doing something, always doing something.
Yeah.
And, no, I must say, I really did like it better in
Okay.
former years.
Well, Dena, this has been a great interview, and I just want to make sure there's nothing that we've left out.
I can't think of anything at the moment.
Okay. Well, I know you're very busy, and we're very grateful to you for making the time to come this morning.
Well,
So
thank you very much. It was my pleasure.